Hey everybody, what I'd like to do is promote a book by Allison Hamblin. And the book has nothing to do with Sasquatches in a way, but in a way it does. And because it's close to Halloween, I thought it would be kind of good to promote her book. There's a monster under my bed. That's the book right there. And Allison, you might know her as Allie Whoop. She's into squatching as well. But this is kind of a good scenario for Sasquatch. Why? Because we're the boy on the bed, and the monster under the bed is the forest. And we're not too sure what's underneath there and what are we going to find. And a lot of us have come across, got the Squatch willies. So it's kind of a humorous way of talking about Sasquatches. She'd like to do two more part of this series, and the boy eventually befriends Ned. That's Ned there, and shows him that he doesn't have to be afraid. So I kind of wanted to point that out because A, it's Halloween, B, Allison is awesome, and you can get this book on Amazon for your kids, and it's got great pictures and stuff, but I won't go too far in showing you all of it. It's a good read, especially for someone like me where it's got one sentence phrases. That helps me out a lot. So check out her book. Get it for your kids. Halloween's coming up. It's a good nighttime story with good morals, and check it out on Amazon. I wanted to talk to you guys about two things. I wanted to talk to you about the first one is what's called emotional energy discharge. And I think this is probably what's going on with most people who are claiming that they're being zapped. And it's quite a unique thing. And if any of you are in the counseling field, or if any of you have dealt in martial arts, or any of you done military training, you'll kind of get the concept of what I'm talking about here. So first of all, emotional energy discharge. Okay, so let's start off from the beginning. The first part of energy discharge is emotions. And in clinical terms, emotions is energy in motion. Meaning that emotions, not only do you feel them in your body, but you also can feel them outside of your body from somebody else. And if you've ever been in a relationship with someone and your backs are turned towards each other, and the next thing you know, you say something out of your mouth and you realize you shouldn't have said it out of your mouth, you can literally feel their energy come across the room and hit you. And that's where we get the phrase, you can cut the air with a knife. In other words, the tension in the room is so strong that you can actually cut the air with a knife. And human beings have a capacity to emotionally discharge their emotional energy out of their body onto opponents. So if you're in martial arts, you know what I'm talking about. That's called the chi. So what you do is you extend yourself out emotionally to who you're going to be fighting. And what that is to paralyze them and freeze them with intimidation. And it can be pretty potent stuff. Now, those are kind of minor examples. I'll give you extreme examples, first with humans. If you've ever done military training, especially if you've done military training for special ops, one of the things they will train you about is when you have to go into the field and take out sentries, in other words, people who are guarding a certain area, one of the first things you don't do is look at the back of their heads. You never are trained to look at the back of a person's head. Some of you have probably been in rooms and stuff, and all of a sudden you felt like somebody was looking at you, and you turn around, and sure enough, somebody in the mall or something, in a restaurant, they were actually looking at you. That's the reason why you never look at the back of somebody's head. Because as soon as you look at the person's back of their side of their head, that emotional energy, kids are pretty strong with this too if you're in your toddler stage. Toddlers can feel up to 25 feet away in a complete circle around them, even if they're on another side of the room. They can sense the environment on the other side of the room, or the other side of the wall, or the other side of the door. So if you've been trained in special ops, one of the things that you're trained to do is not look, you look from below the shoulders down as you sneak up onto somebody. You never look from below the mid-shoulders up, because they'll sense that somebody's looking at them. This will be their first kind of heads up on that stuff. The other thing about in adult human beings, if you've had the unfortunate experience of dating or married to one of these three one of these conditions, a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath, they have a capacity to discharge their emotional energy, and in some terms it's called, in the beginning stages of it, what's called is the sociopathic stare or the narcissistic stare. And it'll first appear in the dating process at the beginning as being this gazing, and we call that primal love gazing. And you see that all the time with young people. You're like, oh, you're so beautiful, I just can't stop looking at you. And they'll even say that same kind of phrase. But the gaze that they're giving you is not the same gaze as that. And down the road, that'll be a very controlling and paralyzing experience for you. Now, I'm speaking from personal experience in my profession of what I've dealt with. I have had psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists discharge their energy into my body to such a point that I became paralyzed and terrified. And even though the client had now left or I was done dealing with them, their energy is still in my body, to the point of I get triggered if I am even thinking about what had just happened to me. And that can go on for days, weeks, and months. Okay, so that's one angle of what I'm talking about. So if we're looking for squatches, and squatches have a capacity, and I think this is why people call it, what they're interpreting is what's called sonic, getting sonically blasted or zapped. I think that's more likely what's going on. If squatches are more human-like, humanoid-like, as bipedals, they're going to certainly have that capacity. Now, bipedals and mammals have that, and I'll share that in a different package here in a minute, but it's in a little different form, but it still does the same symptoms to you when it happens to you. So when you're talking about emotional energy discharge, one of the things I'm curious about, I've been thinking about lately too, is, human beings, some of you might know this, but for you who don't, human beings are the only primate that actually cry. In other words, we have tear ducts where we cry. And if we want to find out whether or not Sasquatches are more towards human beings compared to other primates, they should cry. And if we find the evidence that they cry, now we're not talking weeping like a dog would do or something like that. We're talking literally sobbing, the capacity to sob. So when you're looking at squatches, if they have the capacity and they're more human like we are, and they have the capacity to extend their emotions outside themselves, especially in regards to intimidation, well, I'm pretty sure that if they discharge that into the environment, the emotional environment, you're going to sense it and you're going to pick it up. There's a huge difference between getting getting the bush willies compared to getting primal gazing on you with an energy discharge that happens to your body. And your first clue is going to be your hair standing up in the back of your neck. That's going to be your first clue. Now the problem is when it hits you, it's going to hit you in 0.03 seconds. That means all three of your brains are going to fire in 3 seconds to try to kind of compensate to understand what is going on. But the problem is you actually are detached from your motor skills at the same time. It's a pretty crazy thing. I had somebody who I thought was breaking into my basement one day. And I was awake, I was consciously available, so I thought, and I went downstairs to the basement to find out what it was. I heard this big clang, smash, and my heart was racing. I was already in fight, flight, or freeze, not aware of it. I'm aware that I'm nervous and I'm scared and all that kind of stuff, but I'm not aware that that mechanism is now engaged in my brain. And so as I look down, get my flashlight, look into the room, it wasn't somebody breaking into my place. It was a cat that had jumped in through the open window down onto the dryer and made this big clanging sound. Now, why is that interesting? Well, the interesting thing was I was not in tune or aware that my body had already shut down. Remember, I've already come down the stairs. I've already gotten out of bed. My body's moving, But what's not happening is part of my brain's not working. And how I know that is instead of looking at the cat and relieved that there's a cat there, which I was, out of my mouth came no sense of language whatsoever. Instead of what I was thinking in my brain to tell my mouth to say was, "Oh, you stupid cat." But that's not what came out of my mouth. What came out of my mouth was something like speaking in tongues. It was like, blah, 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 blah. And I thought, what the hell is that? And what it was part of my body had shut off. Now, a little cat's not the same as, if you're dealing with a Sasquatch, or if you're dealing with a psychotic person, or somebody who is not well in the head, or part of their brain is missing, psychopath, but they don't have the capacity for empathy and compassion, but they have the capacity to discharge energy and also use that energy. Very sophisticated. That's the problem with sociopaths and psychopaths, is they're not thinking the way we're thinking. And when we get hooked into that, we are using our empathy and compassion, which we have available, thinking that this other person has it also, and surely they will understand. But that's not what's going on from their side coming our way. Which leads me kind of to the next thing. Just a kind of a segue. I've been thinking about the woo. And the reason why I've been thinking about the woo lately has been the idea, I'm wondering whether or not a psychologist or philosopher set up the Bigfoot community by using the term woo. Because in the Bigfoot community, the word woo is usually about supernatural capacity. But the funny thing about that is, and you guys can check this out yourself, is go online and look up the definition, philosophical, scientific definition of what the woo is. And now, why is that kind of interesting? Well, because if you're going around saying, "I believe in the woo," you better check out what the definition of the woo is before you declare it to anybody. Because what you're saying to them, if they understand what the definition of the word woo is in philosophical, scientific, and clinical terms, it's the inability to have the capacity to look at things critically when you have a belief system in your body. They can't look at it because it now becomes a belief system. And in that belief system, you have feelings and ownership that take it. Now, I'm not talking about anything about supernatural in regards to Bigfoot. I don't personally buy any of that myself. I think there's other things going on. But I just kind of thought, I could just see some jerk doing that. And then the community picks it up as the woo is supernatural. But the woo is not referring to the supernatural. The word definition is not referring to that. Okay, now moving off of that on to the next part, which is about emotional camouflage when you're in the forest. And emotional camouflage is something where you have to stay in a calm, relaxed state. And most of us are not used to being in a calm, relaxed state. We're used to being on all the time. That's not the same as being in a calm, relaxed state. Being centered in oneself is when you have your conscious availability, your thinking process, your feeling process, and your emotional processes all owned and all anchored in yourself. That's what makes you solid. That's what makes you you. If you look around behind me here, this is not the world we live in anymore. We left this world a long, long, long time ago. This rhythm of walking in these forests, unless we're First Nations or Aboriginal, where we're still connected, but that's slowly been whittled away too, to the forest, that's a different rhythm. Remember, we're in Western culture. We're not in the natural culture. And Sasquatches operate in the natural environment. And one of the reasons why I tell you to practice some of these stupid little things like the coyote challenge, or put your foot down in mud, barefoot in mud, put your barefoot in snow, do all these kind of things, learn about tracking, learn about doing structures or bushcraft. It's not about those things specifically. What it is about changing your brain. In other words, providing new neural net pathways so that you get used to being in the forest. So you can detect when something's up, primally, and compared to when something's up psychologically, meaning that you're spooking yourself. I just filmed over and picked up some cameras from Grizzly Lake over there. I mean, the name alone, Grizzly Lake, walking in there and there's nobody there is enough to freak you out, right? So when I talk about calm, relaxed state, calm and relaxed state is very important. Now, in the animal world or kingdom, it's a unique force, because when you are an animal or mammal and you're walking through the forest, you can usually pick up through your sensory part of your brain, or their sensory parts of their brain, when something's not right. So if I'm walking around as a human in the forest and I am nervous, that energy gets discharged out of my body into the environment. And any animal that's around there is going to be spooked by that. And when you are dealing with, you've heard this, you know, if you come across a bear or a grizzly, is you need to talk to the bear. You talk to the bear. Now, the reason why you talk to the bear is to slow yourself down and bring you back to a calm, relaxed state and almost fool your brain to make you think that you're kind of in control. Now, what's happening is the bear is doing a read on you when that happens. Because if you show vulnerability, you're in trouble. And people know that, you know, dogs can sense, or animals can sense when you're in fear. Well, that's true. Now, I'm going to share a story with you that saved my life in regards to kind of what I'm talking about. One time I was in forestry. I was sent off to a block where there used to be an avalanche. And I'm not sure why they sent me there, other than I think what they were hoping was that we could go back into that area and regenerate the forest because of the water or the rock slide that had come down. Now the problem was I was there by myself. My company knew where I was, and but no one had been there for a long time. And so when I showed up there, what I noticed was it was a mountainside that was like this, and it was all boulders. We're talking Volkswagen-sized boulders, house-sized boulders, 500-pound rocks, and I had to go across that block, or that mountainside, and it was an extremely hot day. It was probably close to 30 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, somewhere in there. And I had all my gear on, and I was quickly coming down with heat stroke. And by the time I got halfway across the mountain, climbing these rocks and stuff, I had realized that I'm in big trouble because the heat stroke is starting to affect me. My energy level's going way down, and my thinking processes are going way down. And I thought, I've got to get either off here, but by this time my energy levels are too far to go back the way I came. But what I did notice ahead of me was this cleft that was kind of on the face of the rock slide that came down. So right in the middle there was this cleft, and there was a waterfall or water stream that was coming down the mountain. And I thought if I can make it inside of that, at least it'll give me some time to cool down, refill my water containers, and then I'll try to radio out, which I eventually got to a point where I did that. So I got on my radio and I tried to reach out, but the problem is the angle of where this mountain was, it couldn't hit a repeating station. And what a repeating station is a station where if you're in an isolated area, you should be able to bounce where your location is off these repeater stations so you can go get help, or you call out for help. But that wasn't the case in this scenario. So here I am leaning up into this cleft behind me where all these boulders were, and just letting the water run over my head, soaking my hat down, my clothes down, filling my water jug. And I laid in that for about 20 to 30 minutes. And in the process of doing that, it ended up being like a bit of a ravine too. So as the cleft where I was kind of narrow at the top, it eventually opened up all the way down the side of the mountain. On the left side of where that cleft was, I heard something. And whatever it was big. And I thought to myself, it can't be a deer, can't be a moose, can't be an elk. Why? Because the boulders are too big. A deer and elk are not going to walk over boulders like that. It has to be one of three things. Black bear, mountain lion, or grizzly. So my brain automatically goes into hypervigilance. And I lean back in, but I keep saying I got to get down to the bottom of the mountain. And the safest way to do that is staying on this side of the cleft, while whatever this sound is to my left is on that side of the cleft. And as I go down the mountain over these boulders now, I keep close to the water so I can periodically stop and not overexert myself, because I will be in big trouble if my heat stroke kicks in. As I'm doing that, I can hear this large thing coming down along the left side over to where I'm at. And when I come down to the mountain, when I get to the base of the mountain, there's these willows that are just above my head. And on the other side of the willows is a skid trail. And on the other side of that is a nice ice-cold river that's got salmon in it. And I came down, and as I came down and I got through the willows, as soon as I walked through the willows, turn to my left, and there's a grizzly 10 yards from me that way, and I'm in trouble. Now I only have two options: come back to a calm, relaxed state, or run. And running is going to be dying, and I have to do something. So what I do is the same way I deal with when I'm dealing with aggressive dogs, is I move to a calm, relaxed state, and I discharge emotional energy, not like in martial arts. I'm not trying to intimidate the grizzly, because I will be dead if I do that. But when that grizzly is looking at me, and if you guys are hunters, you know what I'm talking about. Grizzlies can, any kind of animal can look at you with an indifference, with a curiosity, with a wonderment, or with a meal. And this grizzly was looking at me with a meal. And you guys will know what I'm talking about when I say the meal look. It means you're on the plate, and you're on the plate quick. So this is all happening in seconds in my mind and in my body. I have to discharge my fear immediately out of my body, not towards the grizzly, but let it go down below me. The next thing I need to do is move to a calm, relaxed state, and instead of discharging aggression towards the bear, I have to discharge what's called emotional reward. An emotional reward is, I'm going to say a couple of flowery metaphors here to really get you to the point. When I saw that grizzly, I went, holy fuck, there's a grizzly. I'm thinking this. And that grizzly looking at me like, you're dead. And the only thing I could do was center myself into what I just came from, which is heat stroke. And I looked at the river that was across where the skid trail was, and I basted myself in the feelings of when I was in trouble up on the side of the mountain with heat stroke, with the reward of the water that was in front of me with the salmon in it, and I just bathed myself in what that would feel like inside of my guts. And then what I did with that was I pushed it out of my body over to where the grizzly was. I know this sounds supernatural, but this has got nothing to do with supernatural. This has just had to do with emotional energy transference. And as soon as my body went over and hit, the emotion of my body of reward went over and hit that grizzly, which was, man, it's hot. I need to get into that water. That grizzly felt that, and its eyes shifted, turned its head, and walked to the water. And I slinked back slowly out of the area. Now that was luck. I've had that happen to me once with a cougar, and once that happened to me with a grizzly. But I'm putting that towards luck. But both cases, that was the scenario I did with inside my body, and emotionally discharged it to the animal. And the animal sensed that I was not a threat, and it also gave a reward system back to its body that was more than wanting to eat me. No, if you guys have ever trained dogs, you don't have to say, dog sit, Sparky sit. All you have to do is you can use any other word you want. Banana for the word sit, giraffe, tree. As long as your emotional intent is when you say the word giraffe, you feel sit. And you will see your dog will learn how to sit. One time I trained a dog and all I did was bark. And people would say, he talks to dogs. He's like a dog whisperer guy. What they didn't realize was it doesn't matter what word you use, as long as your emotional intent is there. Hope you follow what I'm talking about there. So when you're talking about, listen, I think if we think we're going to just bump into a squatch, I mean, in most cases that's what happens, and it's usually along the side of a roadside. But if you're out searching for one and you bump into one, and that energy discharge happens, remember I felt that grizzly. Not only did I feel it, I remember I didn't see it coming down the mountain, but I could sense it. I could hear there was something up. I could sense it. And my sensing in my back of my neck was standing up. I could sense there was something going on. So coming back to a calm, relaxed state is going to be imperative when you're walking and negotiating through the forest. Because again, if you don't keep that balanced, and I'm not talking about, there's some people out there that are in the bush a lot and they have what's called magical thinking. Magical thinking is roughly between a 3 to 7 year old's developmental stage that's in an adult body, where they're over earthy. You know what I mean by that? You've met them, you know. They're almost like, what's the word? It's magical, you know, fairies and all this kind of stuff, and nature and lovey-dovey and that. I have seen people have been ripped apart by grizzlies who had that mentality. And it's a dangerous mentality to have because you're fooling yourself. It's a delusional style of thinking about dealing with an environment that's not going to interpret the environment correctly, which is going to put you at a risk. So, the point is, if you're getting zapped, you remember, we know very little about how that, well, we know a lot more now how the brain actually works. But we also understand that, listen, 99% or 95% of everything that you have ever picked up has been subconscious. 95%, and you're trying to negotiate life with 95% of stuff that you don't even know what you picked up and how your brain works. So when you're in the forest, you can pull yourself back to a calm, relaxed state. I mentioned to one guy, bring one of those air horns with you. If you're ever shocked, use an air horn. And the guy said, well, I don't think that's going to work on a Squatch. It's not for the Squatch. It's for you to reboot your system. Because the shock of it will reboot everything in your system so that you can come back to a calm, relaxed state. Now, if you can train yourself, which you can, but it takes a lot of practice. When I'm dealing with sociopaths and psychopaths, you better believe I better have to know what the game is, and you better have to understand that I better understand that I cannot enter any of that with them. Because if I do, I'm going to be put in jeopardy. So, hidden camouflage, emotional camouflage, is the capacity to navigate and negotiate. It's going to take you a long time. You're not going to get it in a year. You're going to have to do it with intent and practice being in the bush. Not magically, but literally being in the bush. What will help you come down to relaxed and keep the willies down is while you're in the bush, train yourself about tracking things. Train yourself about filming things. It can be anything. Train yourself about making things. Do stuff where your body stops thinking about what you're doing, because I think if you're going to bump into a Squatch, once the Squatch realizes that you're not in threat and you're just doing what you normally would do, it's not going to sense something's up. There's another area of research that I do. I shared this with some people, and because the location of it, the Squatches can keep an eye on anybody who's in that whole area. So how are you supposed to negotiate and navigate and be sneaky when they can see and hear everybody that's in the whole area? Well, what you have to do is you have to camouflage yourself by being natural to what they're seeing. Everybody in all the tourists are what the people camping and fishing and hunting in the area are doing. And at the same time you're doing that, so you look like everyone else, so it's not unfamiliar to them. But also what you do is in the process of looking like everybody else, that's when you're putting your recorders out, and that's when you're putting your cameras up. And again, if they're watching you, they have a higher state of consciousness. Well, I can't hide it. So I just stay calm and relaxed, like I'm looking for deer. I'm not looking for Squatches. I want them to see me, that I'm harmless, I'm not there to hurt them, and maybe there'll be an encounter that way. Okay, so that's just some food for thought. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you don't like it, don't like it. You don't have to watch my channel. But you know, the problem with these things, the thumb down kind of thing, it doesn't tell you any information. It doesn't help you out, you know. So try to be, you know, not gentle, but be realistic with your comments. If you want to suggest something or give a thought, that's cool. But don't just go like a thumb down. I don't get many thumbs downs anyway. And again, go pick up Allison's book. Help Ned not be so afraid anymore. That'd be awesome. Thanks, guys. Look, just remember, it's going to take you, if you're serious about searching for Bigfoot and Sasquatch, you have to train yourself. We're not from here anymore. We're not from this world. We have to retrain ourselves to be in this world. And that means being in this world sometimes by yourself. Most of the time I'm out by myself. I think the odds are higher that I would bump into them than lower and lesser. So, have a great week. Oh, I also want to say I have to apologize a little bit. I'm doing a 10-part video series for what I do, and it's taken up a lot of time, so there might be a bit of lags between videos because I'm really having to focus on that and get that out. And that's it. Enjoy your Halloween and enjoy your week. And that's it. That's it. I think that's it. Is that it? I think that's it. See you guys.